This example is to try and show you how while loops can be used with strings. I have a feeling that a lot of you are still a little confused about that concept, and I just thought if I can record a video, it will probably become a little clearer. The reason why a while loop is even used in programming is for situations where you don't know how many times the loop has to execute. Now that we're looking at for loops are when you know how many times the loop has to execute and work with the instructions. But in a while loop, there's no certainty. So for instance, here's an example. A word like Copenhagen, right? Just by the look of it, I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 letters in this word. Now, if I have to, for some reason, go through this word and look for certain patterns, for instance, I'm trying to check if this word has an A in it, or an E in it, or an I in it, or an O, like a vowel checker, right? There's no way for me to put an if condition without a loop. Now, if I do use a loop, how do I go through this series? Because this series is letters, it's not a series of numbers like Fibonacci, where I can quickly calculate a new value and go on to the next one. So that's where these values at the bottom come in handy. Now, what are these values? These values essentially are the position numbers in which these letters are essentially held. And so when you create a string variable in Java, automatically you don't have to do anything. The moment you write something like this, something like that, right? The moment that line is encountered, automatically what the program internally does is allocates a position number for each of these letters. So let me make some space there, one for the space, which means 0 goes in here, 1 goes in here, 2 is the space, 3 is position N, position 3 is N, position 4 is A, position 5 is M, and position 6 is E. So which means starting from 0 from the left hand side, automatically it starts giving it position numbers. Now this is interesting, this is useful because since I know how many positions there are in the string, I can then use that value to be my loop controller. Okay, so let's take a look at some example for this. So let's use this example here on the screen. I've already set up my Java file. The object of this program is to accept a string like Copenhagen and accept a character from the user, any character, and a letter, for instance, any letter, and go through the word and check how many times that letter occurs in that word. Okay, so let's try that. First of all, I'm going to make a word, a string variable, and assign it the value Copenhagen. Okay, ideally you would be using text.io .get word here. Okay, I don't want to prolong the situation, so I'm just assigning it values automatically. Now what do I need? First of all, I need a variable to check to accept which letter I'm looking for. So I'm going to make a character letter for that. Letter to search. For now, I'm going to look for, let's imagine A. Okay. Actually, let's look for E because it appears twice. Okay. So that's done. That's where the user comes in with the input. And then the next thing to do is to figure out, okay, how many positions are there in the word that I've accepted. So the word is the word variable. So to get the number of positions, or rather the number of letters in it, I'm going to make size of word. All these are just made up variables, but the function is not made up. I'm going to use the length function. The beauty of this length function, it's a built-in function, and what it is basically it returns the total number of characters in the string value. Okay, so that's an integer. It's basically an integer. An integer value is returned, and that's great because I can use that value. So if Copenhagen is the example, it returns 10, which is correct. Copenhagen does have 10 letters in it. But see, since it starts at 0, there's no position number 10, right? So my end position has to be whatever the length or size of word minus 1. So let's make that as well. End position is size of word minus 1. So in this case it will be 10 minus 1, which is 9, which means I should start at 0. My loop starts at 0. Loop start at 0 and then end at end position, which in this case is 9. And that's perfect because that's basically what my word is all about. Okay, so let's begin. While. Now, what does the while condition take? I know my starting position, which is 0. I know my ending position, which is 9. But who will take me through these numbers? For that, I will need some sort of variable which counts the loop, right? So I'm going to call it loop counter. Loop counter by default starts at 0. Why 0? Because the starting value for the string is 0, the starting position. Now, how long should the loop counter go? It should go as long as the end position is encountered. So my condition is start at 0 and go as long as the value is less than or equal to end position, because that's my end marker. Okay, so let's do that. So while loop counter is less than or equal to end position. Why equal to? Because I do want to go to the last position to number 9. I do want that as well. Okay, so that's why I'm saying equal to. Good, so the loop is set up. Okay, now this will allow me to get, this is basically is allowing me to get into the string. But once you get into the string, how do you actually extract each single character? That's where another function comes in handy called char at, and we'll see how it works. Once I use it, every time it encounters whatever letter I'm looking for, in this case it's E, right? Shouldn't there be something which counts every time it finds it? So I'm going to make a variable for that as well. Okay, for it matches, which means how many matches did you find, how many results did you find. And listen guys, you can make variables as you go. Okay, when I started the program I had no idea how many variables I needed. Logically I'm kind of figuring out the problem and coming to a solution. So as I go, I'm trying to think of how do I keep track of the matches that I find. So don't feel stressed about finding all the variables at the same time. You can't. Programming doesn't work that way. You start with what you know, and then you add variables as you go. Okay, so let's see how it works. So if, now this is where I examine each character or examine each letter in the word. Now how do I examine the letter? I say if word, which is my original word, dot character at, again another built-in function, just like length. Nothing, you don't have to write this function, it's already there. Just like length, there's another character at. So character at what? Character at which position? Character at loop counter. Now why loop counter? Because loop counter is the guy going from 0 all the way to 9, right? So I need to keep checking that variable's value, because it will change to 1 to 2 to 3 and then on all the way to 9. So if this character, this position's character happens to be what? What am I comparing it with? I'm comparing it with the letter to search. Remember, this was the letter I'm looking for. So if it matches, notice how I'm using a double equals. The only reason I will not use a double equals and use dot equals is when I'm using a string comparison. Every other variable type is double equals. Okay, so if I find a match, how do I know I found it? I'm going to increment the matches by 1. So when I find it, I'm going to say matches equals matches plus 1, which means 1 match found. And that's it. The last thing to do in the loop is, since loop counter eventually has to get to end position, nothing's making it move any further, right? This is only the if condition. So how do I get this loop counter to go from 0 to 1? The obvious, I increment it. Oops. Plus 1. So this will start at 0, then go to 1, then go to 2, then 3, all the way till 9. And once it becomes 10, it quits, because the condition is while loop counter is less than or equal to end position. What's end position? It's 9, right? So once it goes to 10, it will automatically quit. And that's it. Let's come out and print our findings. So print line, I'm going to say word has letter to search appearing how many times? Matches times. Notice how I'm using double quotes for the constants and no double quotes, just a variable name for the variables. Okay, and that's it. Let's examine this code and see if it works. Let me just remove the extra spaces here to make sure I have the right amount of variables. I do. Looks like compile it. process completed. Let's execute it. Now because I'm looking for E in Copenhagen, it should say 2, and it does. Copenhagen has E appearing 2 times. Now let's change these variables and see if it works for some other example. Let's enter programming. Okay, so, and I'm looking for the letter M in this. Now that appears twice as well. Let's see if that's true and execute it again. Programming has M appearing 2 times. And now let's check another one. Abracadabra. And I'm looking for A. So just by looking at it, I know it appears 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 times. Let's see if it does it. Execute. Okay, abracadabra has A appearing 5 times. And that's it. So the advantage of using the length and the char at is just this, that length is used to extract the total number of characters in a string, which you would not normally know because it's not an integer or not a series, it's a variable, right? I tried 3 words so far and each word was different in length, but it didn't matter, it still worked. Why? Because the length gave me an end position based on the size, and that's the reason why we use the length. And the character at, well, it's just to extract the character. I'm actually going through each single character based on the position and extracting to see if it matches what I'm looking for. So as everything in programming, the more you do this, the more you kind of get a hang of it. And I encourage you to just come up with more examples on your own. There's the example of the email address. We're looking for certain patterns that also can be tried. But I hope the idea of using length and char at is a little more clearer now. Thank you.